Rwanda's development and ability to function is really unlike many of the other countries have been in this part of the world. The British Council were set up to do two things to achieve one thing: building understanding or facilitating understanding between nations, between the UK and the rest of the world, and between the rest of the world themselves. And it leads to the third thing, which is a prosperous world.
Hello there. My guest this week on the Longform podcast is Abdi Hassan. Abdi is the country director of the British Council. We shall discuss his life journey as well as the place of the British Council in the world. Before this episode starts, I want to make a deal with you. About 85% of you who watch this podcast frequently haven't yet hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy what we do here, here's the deal I want to make with you. If you hit that subscribe button, I promise you that we will keep making the show better and better in every single way. I hope you choose to come along with us on this journey. Now let's get into the show. Mr. Abdi.
Just call me Abdi.
Mr. Abdi Hassan, Country Director, British Council. Thank you so much for joining me on the long form.
Thank you very much for having me, Sanny.
So before we start, we're shooting this on Wednesday, on a Wednesday. So just walk me through, I always hear about country directors and it's like, big men with big cars and big houses and, lots of security. What exactly do you do? Let's look at today. You woke up in the morning, you get to work at, say, what, 8:30?
Around that, yes.
Okay.
I tend to be an early riser.
Yes. And then what? What do you do?
So I fulfill one of those stereotypes of being a big man, but I don't think that's to do with the British Council. That's to do with my stature. A country director does several things.
No. What did you do today? Just
today.
Walk me through your day.
So today I woke up early because every day I woke up early with the children, especially with my daughter who's going to school. I spent the first couple of hours catching up on emails. So you get a lot of emails to understand what is happening, approvals, reading reports, understanding the operations, because I'm responsible for running the British Council Rwanda operation. And then I had a couple of calls. One was with the British High Commissioner, because we work very closely with the UK mission here. We are part of the UK mission, so we're part of what's called His Majesty's Government. If I refer to HMG, I mean His Majesty's Government. And we are the cultural organization for the UK. So actually, I spent an hour talking about what would a year of culture, of celebrating UK and Rwandan culture, would look like for 2025. So that was one thing I did. And then after that, I went to Mill Collins because as we speak right now, actually, we have a workshop going where we have put together, we have a group of district education officers, directors, head teachers, teachers. We are partnering with the University of Sussex from the UK, and we are partnering with the University of Rwanda, and particularly also with the Center for Gender Studies and with the Rwanda Basic Education Board. All of those people are brought together to look at what can we do to remove barriers of teachers with disability. So in that room, there were a number of teachers with visual impairment. There were a number of teachers who had mobility impairment. And it was, what can we do to ensure that continuous professional development for teachers in particular is all the barriers are removed, they can take part in it, which then means they are better able to identify a child or a learner with disability. Now, disabilities is wide, and then they can provide the support that is needed. So that is going to started yesterday, is ongoing for the next couple of days. And then I went back home, had a couple of more calls. One was about our exam operations. So we offer examinations if you want to study abroad, or if you want to take a UK qualification, you can take it in Rwanda. So that's part of our offer to create opportunities. And then it was a quick cup of tea and then coming here.
Fantastic. So for those who are just hearing you, I need them to understand that the person who's sitting across from me is Actually, not Muzungu. He's not white. He's
Obvious, I hope.
for those who are just
Listening,
listening,
yes.
you were born in Somalia.
I was born in Somalia. I won't mention the year exactly, but few decades ago. I was born in Somalia. I was brought up some of my time there. And then the majority of the past 24, 25 years, I spent it in the UK.
Yeah, I'd like you to kind of share a bit of your journey from Somalia to Wales, and how those early experiences from going through all that,
Mm,
how they created the person who's presently sitting right across from me.
absolutely. So if we put it in context, then that journey will make sense. Somalis and particularly the UK have a long-standing relationship. It started as a colonial relationship, as of course lots of relationship with the UK around the world, but also Somalis and Cardiff in particular. The first Somalis in Cardiff was in the late
Cardiff is.
sorry, Cardiff is the capital of Wales,
Mm,
which is one of the countries that make up the United Kingdom. So
mm,
there are four countries that make up the United Kingdom. England, which is of course the largest and everyone
mm,
knows about it, and the capital of it for all of us is London. And then we've got Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales.
mm,
So Wales, the capital of Wales is Cardiff.
mm,
Now, what you'll find in the UK, lots of coastal cities, and Cardiff is one, we're far more open to, and of course, as the UK being a naval nation and seafarers, we're far more mixed, far more open to people from around the world. So in any of those places, especially that whether it's Sheffield, Cardiff, Belfast, all of those cities that are on the sea, there is a long history of people from around the world passing through it, living there, staying there.
mm,
Somalis have been in Cardiff since 1880 something,
mm,
1882, 1883. And we were there as seafarers, as merchants, as people who engaged with the Welsh and the wider
mm,
British society. And that's part of the history of all of our families. So when it came to go to the UK, where I had the most family was Wales.
mm,
That's where the family is. That's where everyone comes from. And then going there, I lived in a really multicultural side of Cardiff. That's where I live until now.
mm,
There are areas in South Cardiff that, I mean, we have a Coptic church not far from where I live,
mm.
from the Greek immigrants. We have, for instance, Italian ice cream makers because they were Italian migration. We have people from Ethiopia, from Eritrea, from Sudan now. Sadly, some of these are lots of migration in the later part of history is to do with sad events, generally. So I live in a really multicultural and a diverse area, particularly in Cardiff, and that's what Cardiff represents for me. So going there,
Before you continue, did you leave Somalia because you wanted to, or was it because of the challenges
I
around
left it as a
the?
child. I left it when I was
Mm.
2 years old. It wasn't a decision that I made. It was just part of where family was living. So we lived in the UK and then part of the other Arab world and other
No,
places.
I was going to ask, was it because of the Somali civil war?
When I was born, it didn't start.
Okay.
When I was born, it was just part of people moving around the world and living in
Mm,
different places and that heritage
mm,
and connection that we have
mm,
with the UK. But later on, there were successive waves
mm,
of Somali migration, not only to actually
mm,
to the UK, but actually to many places around the world. There are Somali communities around almost most European countries. So you'll find Somalis in France, particularly from northern Somalia, Djibouti, which is still a Somali, ethnically Somali people, but they were colonized by France. You'll find them in the UK, and there are estimates of around 500,000 Somalis in the UK.
wow.
It's difficult to really quantify because the census, unless you talk about where you were born, but if
Mm,
you're born in the UK, it's difficult to figure out where
mm,
people are from. There are lots of Somalis in Canada. There's lots of Somalis in Minnesota, in the Arab world, because it just became, we were all in one place. The war happened, and
mm.
there was an explosion of
Mm.
migration across
Yeah.
everywhere. Um, lots of Somalis in East Africa, across East Africa. And I've traveled in this region, and there isn't, every time I land in a city. So recently I went to, last year I was in Nairobi, I was in Dar es Salaam. And every time before I travel, I would get Google Maps out and write Somali food. Because wherever we go, there is a Somali restaurant. In fact, there are two in Kigali. One is not far from here. And that's where we tend to congregate. It doesn't matter where we come from in the world. It doesn't matter which, because I meet Somalis who have Swedish passport, American passport, Canadian passport, British passport, and we all have affinity with those countries. This is where, these are our second nations or first nations. It depends on how you look at it. But that being Somali is the baseline. And that's where we all sort of look at it. And I was brought up in a household where really identifying and understanding and appreciating multi-level identity and heritage was really important.
So there's Somali, there's Muslim.
So rather than that way, I'll put them this way.
Okay.
So there is Somali, there is Welsh, British, European, because I subscribe to the European ideals. There is Arab, because lived in some of the Arab world and I speak Arabic. And Somalia Somalia, the country, is part of the Arab League. There is Muslim, and that shapes a lot of my daily interactions and lives and what I do. African, I feel very strongly African, and I identify as one, and I'm physically one, and I feel as safe and comfortable with that as anything else. And then there are other nuanced cultures that you make up for yourself. So you were asking me about this morning. When I woke up this morning, I had Somali pancakes. So that's what I had for breakfast.
How are those made?
So those are sweet, almost like crepes, but different. So if you think of the Ethiopian anjera, that is really massive, that is a bit bitter, it's smaller and sweeter.
Is it made of teff, like injera?
No, it's made of normal
wheat.
Flour, wheat. So that you'll make it the night, you'll mix it the night before, you leave it to ferment overnight. The anjera ferments much longer. That's why you get the bitter aftertaste. This is a bit, and then you put a tiny bit of butter, tiny bit of sugar. And what I had it with was an English cup of tea.
Yes.
Sometimes we have Somali tea, but that's a bit of a hassle to make. So if and in that, we have our own subcultures of things that works at home. So whenever we're talking about religion, me and my wife, we tend to speak Arabic because, Muslim Quran is in Arabic. If we are talking about Somali culture, Somali politics, talking to our parents, we speak Somali. If we are speaking about something that's a bit more contemporary, scientific, work-related, we speak English because it makes it easier. You don't have to think about what a term, what a purchase order in Somali. I'm sure I can find it, but when I'm having those conversations at home, it makes it easier. And that's what we want to bring our children, is to have these, multilingual approaches and ability. So that being, and then growing up in Wales and just feeling comfortable. And for instance, my local mosque was built and opened in 1932, one of the oldest mosques in Europe, ongoing. There were other ones, but they were not in the shape of a mosque. They were sort of at someone's garden, you put a tent. But this is one of the first mosques that were built as a mosque. So when I go there, although it's sort of rebuilt and repurposed a few times and renovated, I could feel the connection and the history. I could feel that, the people who were praying this in 1932, I'm praying in the same place that they are. And all of those, that's why we're talking the other day, and I'll say I land at Heathrow Airport. And then those who are not particularly familiar with UK geography, Wales, and there is a sort of a gulf of water between Wales and England, and you get on a train and you get either on a bridge or under a tunnel, and you come out of the other side and it says, "Welcome to Wales." And I'm instantly thinking, oh, I'm home. There is familiarity, there is belonging, there is inclusion. And I'll be spending Christmas at Cardiff. And everywhere I go out, I know people I studied with, people I've worked with, other Somalis, other people, wider, the whole community and congregation. And it just slowly, you just walk around and saying hi, good morning, how are you, and how was your son, how was your parent, and so forth. So yeah, that's part of who I am.
So, how, if I was to ask you this question, how has those different heritages, right? So, Somali Muslim heritage, Welsh upbringing shaped your worldview? How is it? Because I feel that who you are kind of shapes how you see the world.
Mm.
Your experiences. If your experiences have been overly negative, then you'll see the world as a cold, dark place. If your experiences, especially as someone young, um, your experiences then will kind of like, they'll help you understand the world better. And if they're good, you'll see the world as a place of rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah.
But you've had all these places that you were raised, family that you were raised in, community that you were brought up in, Welsh friends that you went to school with. How has all of that shaped not just your worldview, but also how you navigate a room you find yourself in?
Mm. I mean, me now, and indulge my sort of a little bit of navel gazing and talking about myself, because that's the nature of the question. But I mean, I'm a great believer that this is not the final product. You to continue to improve and engage until the end of one's life. But my comfortability and confidence in who I am did
Mm,
not come overnight.
mm,
There were times when there is something called code switching,
mm,
where you are instantly switching between different identities just to fit in. And when you are younger, that's what's really important.
mm,
So, in certain places when I was younger, I would play up the more British Welsh side of things than
mm.
being Somali. When I was at home, I would be a bit more Somali. When I was in different places, and these things sometimes were at odds. It was difficult to, if you were to say to me, 15, 14, describe yourself, that was a bit more challenging. When people say, where are you from? And you think, okay, do you have half an hour to go through not a family tree, a family jungle of different ethnicities and cultures? So that was a challenge. But what it meant is a lot of really thinking through different part of yourself and thinking, what do you feel comfortable with? And does identity come from you or from the outside world? It's a little bit of both.
Hmm.
So, with lots of conversations, with lots of discussions, with support of my family and my parent, and just really understanding those histories, you slowly become more comfortable
Being
with
yourself.
being yourself, with who you are. And what it means to be in a room is that more often than not, I can find someone where I have something in common with.
Yes.
So as soon as I walk in, there is the visual cues. You look at people for color. That's just, you scan the room and there'll be, yeah, I see there are people of color here.
Yes.
And then the next bit will be, okay, you'll start hearing accent. Oh, I can hear a British accent. I can hear a Welsh accent. Um, you look at, and you might see a woman who's wearing the hijab. So I always make a point of on Sunday we were in Norskin as part of British Council programs doing what's called the creative hustle, which we can talk about later. And there was a woman wearing a hijab. So I was saying hi to everyone. And then when I got to her, it wasn't good afternoon as everyone else. It was salam alaikum.
Hmm.
And that just creates an instant connection. So it's what it helped me to do is to appreciate people's point of view.
Hmm.
It is really to understand. I can seamlessly move between watching the BBC and watching Al Jazeera and appreciating point of view, both points of view, even if they are at odds with each other. And then listening to BBC Africa or some of the other news that is coming out of Africa and thinking, okay, is this just only a Western view of what Africa is?
Hmm.
Is this, this idea of Africa is one or two things. Either the wild wildebeests and lions and giraffes, and that's only one side of Africa, or famine, war, really difficult imagery to look at. And that's another side of Africa. Both have been present in Africa at different times, in different locations, in different places. We're not sort of hiding that fact, but that's not the only Africa.
Mm.
If you say to people, small things such as actually people get stuck in traffic. Same in London. We get stuck in traffic. Everyone is a bit annoyed with public transport. People are worried about normal stuff in terms of getting, the right things in certain places. Daily living is actually very metropolitan. You would hardly see a lion going around your background or, in your back garden or whatever it is. That is more of the norm. And then people have a better appreciation of what is it to live in Africa rather than some of those extreme imagery.
Yeah. So when I was doing my when we had a conversation earlier, and I was doing a little bit of my research on you, I just realized just how well traveled you've been because of the work that you do in the British Council. You've worked in places with complex histories and unique cultures. I mean, you've been stationed in Jeddah.
Yes.
Baghdad.
Yes.
Kathmandu. Lagos. Now, let me. I'm a sucker for a good story. So let's do this for me. Could you can you tell me about one impactful incident that happened in all of those cities that kind of like changed, maybe opened your worldview, made you think differently about how you relate to people, or even how you relate, I guess, even to yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, some of those stories are deep and impactful, as you mentioned, and some of them just happen because of sheer being in a new place, trying to understand where you are and figure out your locality. Lagos was my first place to go out of the UK. Spent most of my life in the UK by then, joined the British Council in 2015. And then I've worked for 6 months in London, which interestingly, living in London was also difficult. Because I come from a small city, people talk to each other at the bus stops. We have a culture in Wales where you just chat to people. You get in the morning and you go to the bus stop and you say, "How's it going?" And you have a conversation.
Yeah, I learned that. I think I told you this story. I learned that when you get into the London Underground, you're not supposed to maintain eye contact.
No.
And you're not supposed to say hello or talk to anyone. Yeah. And so imagine my first ever time. I think I'm going to Oxford Street, and I not only commit the cardinal sin of making eye contact with someone, I actually start trying to have a chat with them. The look I got. Oh my days! I thought they were going to beat me.
Yeah, no.
It's like I had killed an animal.
A kitten. You strangled a kitten in front of them.
They were so disgusted, shocked and disgusted. And that was my experience.
People think, we just spoke about the diversity and the richness of Africa. And I think there is same in the UK, much smaller, of course. But there are lots more. There's a lot of diversity in the UK within those nations, and also parts of those nations. You'll see it a lot in accents. We've got so many accents in that part of the world, and different ways of doing things. If you come to Cardiff and if you come to these parts of the world, people will just smile at you, and you'll ask them where is. You could stand somewhere in Cardiff and say, "Do you know any good restaurants around here?" And they'll point you, and they may sort of walk a few yards with you and have a conversation. We tend to be a lot more friendly and a lot more engaging, and it's easier. So I had similar incident when I've lived in London. I always struggle in the underground or the tube where you've got two trains and you've got northbound and southbound. I'm dyslexic and they're actually challenged. Always a struggle with those two. So I would get to the bottom of the stairs and I will stop. And you shouldn't, because just there is a sea of people. They're constantly moving to try and figure out which one I'm going into. And then you ask someone and they have this fleeting glance and then they move. They wouldn't even stop to say, oh, this is where you need to get to. That doesn't happen. You have to ask someone who's official, who works there, and then they'll help you. That isn't the case where I was in Wales. So I was sent after working in London for 6 months to go to Lagos, one of the best cities. I absolutely love Lagos and Nigeria.
Really?
It's fantastic level of energy. It's
When you say energy, I think the word I hear is kavuyo. Have you ever heard, you understand that word in Kinyarwanda? Kavuyo?
no.
So confusion, things moving way too fast, and you cannot make sense of it. Noise, certain a little bit of illegality happening. Not a lot of security. AKA I would call it the anti-Kigali.
It is the antithesis of Kigali. It is as opposite to Kigali as possible.
But you loved it.
I loved it. I wouldn't say, rather than a little bit of illegality, I would say hustle culture. Because I'm the director of British Council, we can't endorse illegality, whether small or large. But I felt there was a hustle culture. I felt there was, either you make it or that's
or
it.
you don't.
You are gone. It's not forgiven. But it has soul. You could feel the beating soul and heart of Lagos. You will never be bored in that city. You're right. The noise, the confusion, the smells, the whole thing, every single bit of it, it's fantastic. At least in my view, because I feel comfortable in those places. I mean, I like to go to places where the locals go. I do not describe myself as an expat. That isn't my thing. I don't like to be living in a gated community with people who are going
Who look like
through,
you.
A lot of times they don't look like me, actually. But that's not quite my thing. I want to live because these are experiences that, at the end of our lives, or when you're a bit older and you retire, the only thing that stays with you are the memories. So you have to work at actually creating memories and creating lasting, impactful memories. And I can't be leaving Rwanda and someone says, how did you find Rwandans? My worldview or my view of Rwanda cannot be only shaped by the Rwandans who are paid to interact with me, my colleagues. That can be. I have to have Rwandan friends. I have to go to places where Rwandan congregate. I've gone to a wedding, I've gone to a funeral, I've gone to a few church services. We're talking about me going to the local mosque on a regular basis and just having a conversation, just figuring out what makes you tick, what happens here, what do you worry about, what are when do you wake up and other things. But anyway, before I was sent to Nigeria as part of the British Council, you have to go to a place called Rugby, which is,
Rugby.
Rugby is a sport, but we also have a place called Rugby in the UK, in the middle of England, and you go to this field and you are given security training. So you are given awareness about how to behave in certain situations. And there is a lot about running around in this makeshift farm and someone shouting, incoming, as there is an object or a missile coming into where you are, and how you should behave, which happened in Iraq a lot more often, but that wasn't the case in Nigeria. How would you behave if you are, if you're kidnapped? How can you engage? What can you do? All of those things. And kidnapping was the thing in Nigeria.
Yes,
Kidnapping,
still is.
Yeah, kidnapping and things such as armed robbery, those types of things. And just being aware of your surroundings. If you in one moment you're in a market like Cameronco market, everything is happening really well. That's a local as you everyone aware, local, busy market. And then on one of the adjacent streets, there'll be a demonstration. And you just need to be aware that that could get nasty very quickly.
Mm.
So I was sat in a room as the only black person with lots of other diplomats, lots of other people who are traveling around the world in different places. And I'll put my hand up. At the back of my mind, I was thinking, yeah, I'll just blend in. I'll just
like, if there's a problem, just
it's
walk into the crowd and just leave.
Yeah, I'm just another black African. Nothing. I don't have the Union Jack on my face. I'll just. It's not a big deal.
Unlike you guys.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I didn't verbalize it. Then I land in Nigeria, and there's so many stories of Nigeria. We'll be here for days. But one thing that taught me I was not that easy to miss is that I said to one of my colleagues, listen, Nigeria, West Africa is known for fashion. I want to go and get fabric.
Mhm.
Okay, take me to the largest market that you have. Now, in those places, there's all sorts of procedures and approvals and other things.
Just to go to the market.
Just to go to the market. Now, I get to this massive, it's almost a small city, massive market where anything under the sun is being sold. You imagine it, someone is selling it. I get off the car and my colleague is just a few yards behind me, and I just walk into the market, and this guy comes and says, Oga, big boss, and just grabs my hand and says, I'll show you something. He instantly knew I was not from Nigeria. It was just, I stood out like a Thor's son. It's just everyone knew.
Did you ever find out why?
I didn't look Nigerian enough. I didn't look West African. People knew I was not from there, but it depends on the level of exposure. They'll have a guess. They have wild guesses. They'll have guesses in terms of, somewhere from West Africa, so let's say Ethiopia, Somalia, if they've been exposed to those types of places. But I've heard some really outlandish ideas, such as Moroccan, Indian, because I've got softer hair. But the constant was, you are not from here.
Yeah.
That bit was clear. And I remember getting on the wrong plane in Nigeria. I was coming my second weekend. I was in Abuja and I was supposed to fly back to Lagos. Now, I think quite rightly, the British Council office thought, you're an adult. You've traveled before. We'll drop you off at the airport and you can make your way. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. I think it might have been the older airport and there was a renovation, the new one. There was this sort of makeshift airport or some sort of a terminal. And there was someone who was constantly making PA announcements. Constantly, there's an announcement. I can't hear anything. I have no clue. There is that confusion we're talking about. It is busy. There have been delays to some of the planes. People are there. There's lots of people on the floor.
Some people are shouting.
The whole thing is...
It's a lot.
But I like it. It's exciting. It's part of what that part of the world is. And I get to so you are on the ground floor and there are different gates and people who are just congregating around every gate and they're just having a chat. These are the officials who work in the airport. And there are buses. So the bus will come, people will get on the bus and they'll take them to the plane. So I saw a bus come in. Everyone's getting on that bus. So I thought, let me go and ask if it's going to Lagos. If the bus is taking you to the plane, that is going to Lagos. So I get to this 3-4 people who are talking and it's a bit hot and they're a bit tired and they're a bit fed up. And I get to them with my cheery self and go, hi, good afternoon. Lagos? And without really engaging, they just shook their head. And I thought, okay, yeah, that's got on the bus, one of the first people to get on the bus. I am taken to this small plane, like the Bombardier type of planes, there's got only 2 seats on either side. I get on the plane, I'm comfortable, put my luggage in the luggage compartment, and I'm sitting there. Everyone is getting on the plane, and I'm thinking, okay, so you've made it. Another hour, 2 hours, you'll be Lagos. And I've just said to the hostess, oh, can I get some water? And she said, when we are airborne, then we'll start the service. And then I said, okay, this is my first trip between the 2 cities. So how long does it take to go to Lagos? And she paused and her face changed. And she said, say that again. And I said, how long does it take to go to Lagos? And she said, we're not going to Lagos.
Where were you going?
And no, in some places, I remember the plane goes somewhere and then continues the destination.
Yes.
So I said,
So where was the plane going?
I can't remember. It's going to the west of country, and I'm supposed to go into the south of country.
Oh dear.
Completely another place. And Nigeria is massive. Completely a different. Not even you couldn't even drive between those two. And I said, no, I get it. Eventually, when you get to Lagos, and she said, no, there's no eventually. We're not going to Lagos. We will go to the city, and that's where this trip will terminate. Well, until tomorrow morning, that's the end of it.
Oh no.
And she said, show me your ticket. So I show her the ticket, and she says, you're not
On the right plane.
get off the plane. And I'm going, get off the plane. Yeah, get off the plane. And I'm thinking, okay. So I had a bit of a beard. I have my rucksack. I put that on, and it's a tiny plane, and I'm trying to get off the plane. Everyone is coming on, and people are shouting. People are going, is there something wrong with the plane? Why is he getting off the plane? So the hostess, to make sure that people don't panic, she shouts over my head saying, no, he's on the wrong plane. And then there was this sort of almost like domino effect with people telling each other, he's on the wrong plane. What an idiot. He's on the wrong plane. And I'm getting this plane with everyone sort of me and this news, this relaying of news are walking with each other. So as soon as I'm walking next to each other, they go, on the wrong plane. How did you get on the wrong plane? I said, don't worry about it. So I get off. And I'm around with the security people, with the people who just, of those people who usually around the plane doing what they're supposed to do, pre-flight checks and others. And I approached one of them and I said, where is the Lagos plane? I'm on and they go, well, show us your ticket. So I show them. Everyone's a bit surprised. How did you make it here? So they look at it and they go, okay, do you see that plane over there? There's around maybe 100 meters, not very far, but also not close. Do you see that plane there? Yes, that's the Lagos plane. And I go, okay. And they go, you see this red line? Yeah, do not cross it the other side because that's where the planes are taxiing. Yes. So stay on this side of the plane and just walk to it. And I remember just pausing for a moment and thinking, should I go back to the terminal? And they said, there are no buses going back to the terminal. That's it, the last bus left. And the terminal is much further. This is sort of high noon, it's a bit hot. And they said, don't worry, just go. There is another sort of half an hour. Don't worry about it. Now, I'm walking on the tarmac of an airport at a time where Boko Haram was a bit active with big beard and a rucksack. And I'm thinking, this is not a good idea. This is, sooner or later,
someone's going to
absolutely. There'll be just commandos, helicopters, like these Hollywood movies. This is not. And I'm walking, thinking, how on earth have you gone from Cardiff, British Council in central London, to this?
To a potential Boko Haram.
Exactly. So I'm having this dialogue, and I reach there, and some of the luggage. People are just standing about and waiting for passengers to come. And everyone just looks at me a bit puzzled. What are you doing?
Where are you going?
Exactly. So I just read, is this the Lagos plane? And they say, yes. I said, what do you mean, is this the Lagos? Where did you come from? I came from the other plane. I said, show us your ticket. So I showed them their ticket. And they just burst out laughing. As in my face laughing. As in, really, really, this is a comedy show for them. As in really laughing, belly aching laughing. It's not one of those laughing. And then I spent the next half an hour. It was not a pleasant conversation, but next half an hour where the captain comes, they tell him the whole story. The captain laughs. Someone else comes, they tell them the whole story. They also laugh. And then eventually, around 6, 7 in that evening, I got home in Lagos. And it was a moment of just appreciating being in a different place, being in an interesting place, and just take it in your stride. Because, in where I was brought up in the UK, we expect, if the train says 10 o'clock, we expect the train to be there at 10 o'clock, or at least 9:55. And if it doesn't move by 10:05, we're a bit anxious. Get on with it. We've got stuff to do. We expect things to run on time. And then I'm coming to this place and you think, okay, I need to be more resilient. I need to change my expectation of things to happen. I need to roll with it. And that has been ever my worldview of the start point. It's just roll with it, see what happens, embrace it, see the funny side of it. I always think a potential embarrassing, difficult situation at that moment, it's always a potential good dinner story at
If
a
you
later
survive
date.
it.
Yeah, exactly. If you survive it is always the main thing. But at a later date, once you have made peace with it, then you can tell that story.
So tell me about Baghdad.
Baghdad was fantastic. I loved Baghdad.
So
By the way,
what year is this by then?
I landed in Baghdad in December 2020, and I left in December 2022.
No missiles though.
No, there were many.
Oh.
In fact, I lived through roughly 12 hours of gunfire in the middle of where there were two opposing groups. And the embassy was sort of on a lower, the highest building in the embassy was maybe 2 stories or 3 stories. And there were 2 high rises, one at the airport, one with someone else. And 2 opposing factions got on this and they started firing at each other.
I hadn't thought that there was still that kind of violence
There
in
were
2020.
flashing moments. So it's not out and out war, but there are still flashing moments of real clashes and deadly clashes. I mean, in those, there was something like 20, if I remember correctly, people who sadly killed during that. And
During that time when
during that time. So we had something like 1 or 2 projectile or missiles who fell on the embassy.
Oh no.
Thankfully, they did not detonate. We had 400 rounds of ammunition falling on the embassy. In fact, the only way I can describe that evening, because we lived in these fortified, what's called pods or containers. So the door, it's made of metal, enforced metal, and it's really heavy. And it's supposed to take direct fire, direct hits. The windows, you have a fortified concrete on the top of it that's supposed to take a direct hit of a certain missile, anything higher, and but they'll try and see what would most common, and you're supposed to put your vest on,
the bulletproof
the bulletproof vest and a bulletproof helmet on, and get as low, maybe under their bed or somewhere as low as possible, to make yourself smaller. So me and I'll give a shout out to my manager at the time who lived through this, and a great mentor, Jim Buttrey, who was the country director of British Council at the time, and I was the deputy director. We were in the office and we knew there were rumblings. We knew something is going to happen. And then you get a very loud siren that says something is happening. Go undercover. So in the office, we had a fortified area that we all run to. And this used to happen regularly, by the way. But
so you're used to this by
but not
the training,
as bad as this is happening.
The rugby training
was useful. Not good on my knees, but useful. You can't keep diving every other. So we get there, and then there was a lull. So they said, go to your pods, put your gear on and run. And that was one of the few moments, or the only moment actually, in the British Council where I was genuinely fearful for my life.
Yeah.
Because we were well, if this gets out of hand and you have a armed militia that's storming the embassy, what's going to happen? Now, we have many other, just so our listeners understand, we had so many other evacuation plans. There were other, it wasn't, we were just living in a bit somewhere and we're exposed. But I was there in the evening, because I was also responsible for security for our staff. So I've gone into what's called the telephone tree, where you call everyone. You just make sure, where are you? Are you okay? Are you fine? Is your family okay? What do you see out of the window? Are there problems where you are? So when we've done that, the background of all of this is that I can hear the bullets hitting the door where I am. And the only way I can describe it, if you ever put popcorn in the microwave and you just hear really loudly, because you are in this little place and someone is banging metal. So you just hear it and it's nonstop. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. And occasionally you hear a loud explosion and everything shakes. So you get used to these bullets hitting, and then a loud explosion happens, and it's almost like you are standing in front of a really powerful bass speaker. It
Mm,
just hits you. It reverberates around
mm.
in you. Um, and what was because it's really difficult in any of those training moments when you are doing training in the middle of um, the
English
UK.
countryside.
Yeah, exactly, and it's wonderful. And one of my training was in the summer, and English countryside in the summer looks absolutely beautiful and stunning. One of the things I used to think about when it really happens, will this training kick in?
Mm,
Or will it be freeze? Because there is no option for either fight or flight.
mm,
You are stuck in this. So if you freeze, you just panic it. And what was really useful, because we used to do it regularly, is just to kick into action. This is what we're doing. We're gonna check on our stuff. We're gonna report this. We're gonna do this. And you end up actually your time is taken by doing these things. And the other thing that I didn't want to happen, because my wife and I think my daughter was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old,
mm.
living in Wales, in Cardiff. They couldn't do anything for me. And I didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. So I
Did
didn't actually tell them on
mm.
that evening. Um, and it was a moment of, again, thinking, okay,
Was it? Did you, in those moments, ever second guess your life choices that brought you to Baghdad, in the middle of not necessarily a street fight, but you took yourself there.
I did. No, of course. I'm an adult. I have
Mm,
choices. I have options. I
mhm.
could have done a cozy office job in that's a mile away from where I live and never gone anywhere.
Yeah,
Would I have made those choices again? Absolutely, without a
with
shadow
the
of a
full
doubt.
knowledge
Oh,
that
definitely,
I'm going to have these moments.
definitely, because those moments is what make you. You are accumulation of your experiences. I, I come back to what you said. As long as you survive them. Now, when you are in the thick of it, you don't actually you don't have the time to dwell on these things. You adrenaline is kicking in and you're doing what you need to do. You just taking very well rehearsed series of actions
Mm,
that you need to do and you need to make. And then you think about, and this is a lot about getting to know who you are, what stresses you, and what reduces your stress. So you think about, okay, how can I reduce the level of fear and stress I have to be able to function?
mm,
What can I do? And how can I? And one of the things I love is watching comedy clips,
mm.
just
Just having a
yeah,
laugh.
absolutely. Just trying to have a out of body experience where this is not happening and you just watch something else that distracts you that is so far removed from what you're living through. But let me tell you one quick thing about what we did in Iraq. And there is a fantastic story that just stays with me. I traveled from Baghdad to Erbil, which is the northern and the second capital of the country, and is the first capital of the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Is an
Mm,
autonomous region of that country, and then we've gone across from Erbil to Mosul, and I am in Mosul, which just not long ago was liberated from Daesh,
mm.
um,
ISIS.
ISIS. And I'm coming to, so I was talking today about having a workshop with teachers. I was in a workshop with young artists talking about creative economy. How can you make, a living out of your art, your craft? Um, and I speak Arabic. I'm very privileged in that way because I can talk to people. I can just have a chat.
Mm,
It's no longer British Council or Abdi.
mm,
You could just have a chat. So I'm having a chat with this very happy, very gregarious young man, early 20s, and he wanted to make one of the first comic books in Arabic in Iraq.
mm.
That was his thing. So he came to learn about writing, about marketing this, about finding partners, all of that stuff. So I said to him, "Tell me about Mosul at the time of ISIS. What happened?" And he said him, his brother, and a couple of cousins hid in a water tanker that was empty, and they were trying to be smuggled out of the city. Some of the insurgents and some of those terrorists found them, took them out, and they were on their knees, ready to be shot. So there was a moment when, for certainty, they thought, that's it, we are dead. as that was happening, some of the Iraqi soldiers or something else happened which made those guys who captured them run away. And I said to him, how, in that very moment, what were you feeling? And so I didn't have any feeling. I was just absolutely numb. All I could wait for is for us one by one is to hear the shot and then see them fall. And then I'll be next. I've had maybe a 40-minute conversation before he told me that. You would never think he'd lived through something like that. You would never, I remember talking to the chancellor of Mosul University, and I've said to him, how was it? And he said, and he's at the time was the head of one of the schools, and now he's the chancellor, Dr. Qusay. And we're just having a conversation over breakfast in one of those conferences we do about higher education. Having a conversation with the chancellor of Mosul University, one of the largest universities, one of the oldest universities in Iraq, over breakfast and having a nice conversation. And I said to him, tell me about the time when Daesh, because Daesh came to Mosul and came through Mosul incredibly quickly. It was just within few hours, they had control of the city and they were looking for anyone of value. Anyone who held governmental position has a social value or monetary value, and they were just assassinating them. So he said, I was at the university. I had a call saying Daesh has breached the city. They're coming through. It's time for you to run. And he said, I had a small car. I took my car. His mother was living with him. He put his wife, children, and mother, elderly mother, and a mattress on top of the car and just drove out of the city to the other side towards Erbil. And because there was such mass exodus, it takes a few hours to actually get from one side, but such mass exodus, people were stuck in the middle. So he said there was one late night in the evening, I took the mattress out, put it on the side, roadside in this desert. And I helped my elderly mother to sit on that mattress. And me and my wife and my children were just sat there. And he said there was a moment when I was in the middle of nowhere thinking, this morning I was a respected chancellor. I had a different life.
Yes.
So you talk to these people and you engage with them and they are living it and they're rebuilding their lives. They are working tremendously hard to have a better life for them, for their families, for their society. And the British Council is there to help. And you think those types of conversations are absolutely worth all of those other things you have to go through.
Yeah. It kind of feels a bit of a downgrade coming to Rwanda because, you've come from absolute excitement to, just mundane living here. I've seen your offices. They're you're not likely to be disturbed at all. Like the loudest thing will be birdsong, or a moto drive by. But despite our peace and everything, Rwanda does still have its distinct history and historical context that is very different from a Mosul, a Jeddah, a Lagos, an Abuja, a Wales, a Cardiff. But you're here as now country director. With all of that in mind, how has your experience here in Kigali as country director been? And how does working in Rwanda differ from all your other postings?
I wasn't expecting Rwanda to be what it is.
What does that mean?
I put my hand up and I will say I knew about Rwanda, the two Gs, that when you Google Rwanda, it comes up, the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, and the fact that you can go and see the gorillas. That is a common view around the world for what Rwanda looks like. I think it is changing. It's crucial to mention that is changing, and more people know about Rwanda a lot more. And Rwanda is much, much more than the two Gs. In fact, it offers the whole of the alphabet and much more. That would be my take on the country. And I remember, and I tell this story very often, I landed from an overnight flight from London with my wife, who was heavily pregnant at the time, and my very energetic toddler, 3 years old. And I have a theory that generally the immigration departments around the world have a knack for employing people who tend to be less smiley, to be polite, and maybe ready for a confrontation.
Mm.
And I land in Kigali airport, walk in, and I was ushered by this lovely lady to, because we had children. No, no, past this queue, and she presented me to this immigration officer who greeted us with a massive smile, playing with my daughter. And I was thinking, this is a really good start. This is wonderful. And then we gave him 3 passports. 2 were British. One is my wife, who has a Somali passport.
Mm.
And usually, wherever we go, I have to present a whole folder of paperwork for my wife to say, oh, no, no, she can't travel because of this, because of that. She got this, she got all of that stuff. It's part of the privilege of passports that we're all familiar with, especially if you're in Africa. It takes you so much to prove that you can go somewhere and come back. That wasn't the case here. He actually took her passport first, stamped it, gave it to her, and said, thank you. And she stopped for a moment thinking, wait a second.
This is odd.
Did he refuse me entry? Because that's what she got used to. It's like, no, no, darling, you've finished. I said, really? And I said, yes. I said, well, this is my kind of people. So then he looks at my passport. And of course, I didn't have a visa to start with, because it's easy. You come in and then you go to the immigration department and you present yourself. And he started speaking to me in a foreign language. And I'm thinking, I can't place it. It's not one of the languages that I know or familiar to me. So I said to him, I'm really sorry. I don't speak whatever you are speaking it. And he looked at me, almost quizzically, thinking, why don't you speak Rwanda? And I'm thinking, this is very strange. I've just landed. I've never been asked in a country where you just landed, why don't you speak the language of that country? So I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not Rwandan. And he smiled again and said, sorry, you just look Rwandan. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe 1 or 2. I get driven from the airport to the center of Kigali. Actually, we were living at the start, not far from Kigali Heights. And my wife and I were impressed with 2 things: how clean the city is, the infrastructure and pavements. And I've lived in many places and visited many places where the walkability of a city is really tough because you don't have pavement. It's a bit difficult. The infrastructure is really not well maintained. Where here that isn't the case. And the second thing was, these people look like us. This is really interesting. For once, this was my experience since I came here in March 2023, is that I feel comfortable. I feel, at least from a visual point of view, I feel I belong. I'm not in a place where I remember walking into a small market outside of Ankara in Turkey that does leather. And I just walked in and I stood at the door, and almost everyone, there might be about 50, 60 people, everyone stopped and just looked up. I was the only person of color. I was the only black person there. And it was such a novelty. I mean, people actually were offering me tea, but that's what I got used to. When I was in Nepal, when I was in different places, you get used to being the only person or one of a few. And here I was in a place where actually most people spoke to me in Kanyarwanda. Most people thought I was from here. So that's on a personal level. And then my daughter was born here, not far from here, in King Faisal Hospital. And
really?
Yeah, she was. She was born in King. We had a fantastic experience here. It was wonderful. And then I happened to be, and I'll do the odd shout out, but I absolutely loved working with Dr. Valentine, the previous Minister for Education, because we've spent 2-3 days together in London attending Education World Forum as part of British Council offer and the UK government to talk to other ministries around the world. It's a big conference that takes place over a few days. And she saw me check in because it wasn't far. We landed in March and we went to Education World Forum in May. So I took my pregnant wife and a toddler to a foreign country and then I left. So as you would imagine, I was worried. I would, text, check on her. Are you okay? Is everything fine? Do you need anything? Do I need to call someone? And the minister said to me, are you okay, Abdi? And I said, no, I'm just checking on my wife. And she said, okay, so she's pregnant and she's like 7 or 8 months, so just making sure that she's fine. I said, do you know what you're having? And I said, "Oh, I think we're having a girl." I said, "Can I? Have you thought of names?" I said, "Oh, it's a contentious issue, but you can add." And she said, "Listen, I'm going to give you a name, and I'm going to give your daughter a name. So I'll call your daughter Kanyana."
Kanyana.
Kanyana.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, what does it mean? And she said, "It's a small calf,"
Mm.
um, which absolutely beautiful in Rwanda, but difficult to translate. Saying to my wife, "We're going to call our daughter a cow," was not, it didn't translate well culturally.
Mm.
But in Somalia, what cows are for Rwandans, we have camels.
Yes.
So I was, she got it then. Oh, okay. This is actually, the royal cows. There's all, this is a much higher stated than just any, like in the UK, any cow. And then she said, "Listen, you look like us, and I will give you a name, and it's Isanu."
Isaro.
Isanu,
Isano.
like Isanu.
Mm.
And it was just fantastic. So that on the personal level. Now, in terms of work,
Did you actually name your daughter Kanyana?
yeah, she has two names. She has name as Kanyana, and then she has
On her passport?
not on her passport.
Ah.
But Kanyana is. We all have multiple names.
Mm.
Only one, unfortunately, the UK passport office only allows you one name. But otherwise, she'll have like 5 names, and she does actually have multiple names. But Kanyana is what we call her regularly, and we love. I think sometimes about, because I'm leaving Rwanda prematurely. I was supposed to be here until 2027, but I keep thinking one day we will come back and I will stand in front of King Faisal Hospital and I'll say to her, "This is where you were born." Whether you feel belonging or not, Rwanda is part of your history, is part of who you are. And you were born here. You can always ask for citizenship if you wish to.
True.
And maybe she will. And then we can all retire here and she will be our connection. So the other thing in terms of work, I am. It's absolutely, it's still to this day, really impresses me how functional the country is. And you think that should be taken for granted, but it isn't the case. You have a conversation with someone, and once something is agreed on, it can be implemented at lightning speed. Rwanda's development and ability to function is really unlike many of the other countries have been in this part of the world. It is fantastic. There is a real vision and also a real focus on that vision, and just get on with it and moving forward with it. And these ideas of having, let's look at the National Transformation 1, National Transformation 2, all of those different plans, so you come in and you think, okay, what can we help with? What can we support? How can we exchange and facilitate the engagement between the UK and Rwanda to the betterment of both nations? And then how can we facilitate, because we are, the British Council is present in around 17, 18 countries in what we call sub-Saharan Africa. If you look at the whole Africa, it's closer to 25, 20, I haven't counted, but it's quite, we are prevalent in this part of the world. And we had a long history. We were set up in 1934. So on the 5th of December this year, the British Council will celebrate its 90th anniversary. We work on education, arts, and culture. So you come and you think, okay, you've got a strong, functioning state. Things are working. Things are happening. You're moving forward. How can we be part of that story of the success and the movement forward of Rwanda? So actually working here has been really fulfilling, because I'll give you a very simple example. In most places around the world, I land and I struggle for minimum of 2 weeks to 6 months to get the right visa. Not because of who I am, it's just because of visa and residency processes are problematic. Here, it took, I think someone helped me with the online bit with the iRambo
Mhm.
website. And then I went to the immigration department, and I think within a couple of hours, because I kept going to the wrong offices, but once I knew what I was doing, it took less than half an hour to get residency for 2.5 years, the residency card, and just come out of there. And I was thinking, this is another level of efficiency. This is really fantastic.
Mm.
This is excellent work. We go to the Ministry of Education to discuss certain policies, engagement, and there is real knowledge and understanding. We talk about how this lands at different levels of government
Mm.
and how can we support. So I think I always talk about Rwanda as a really fantastic example for a developing country, for this part of the world to look up to. So and I'm not saying this just to pander, but as I
You can
said,
pander a little bit.
happy to do so. But as I said, I was in Somalia a few months ago. I was in Kenya. I was in Dar es Salaam. I was in Addis, in different places, Lagos, Ghana. Um, and I talk to people around the world and British Council colleagues. We are around 110 operations around the world, of how easy or how difficult it is to function
Mm.
in a particular country. And here, it's incredibly easy. There are massive challenges, there are problems, there are difficulties. But there is a difference between actually knowing, recognizing, acknowledging, looking for a solution, having partnerships, and then working on those, and just or not even thinking about them.
Mm.
You'll come and say, well, this is a problem. And people go, what? We didn't look at that.
Now, I just you'll have to forgive me. I'll be a bit mischievous. Now, obviously, you have your mission, which is to spread cultural exchange between countries and Britain. But which is great. Like when you think about, let's share cultures and talk to each other and get to know each other. That sounds delightful. However, let's talk about the practice of that exchange, because it gets a bit complicated, right? Because when you think about this, uh, when you think about the British Council and what that word means to people, I mean, you'll have to deal with challenges such as accusations of cultural imperialism. You'll have to deal with accusations of the fact that you might just be, a bunch of spies. You're here calling yourself a cultural representative, but you are perhaps spying on people. There might be issues around religion, right? Britain is overall a Christian nation. Now you're working in Islamic societies, and there are certain values that Britain has that maybe those Islamic societies don't. So there are those issues. How do you keep things in your experience? Because you've also probably had to deal with some of these issues.
Yes.
So how have you been able, as the council, and maybe you, because you are the representative of the council, you were either deputy country director or country director, how have you been able to work in the knowledge that people feel these things about the organization that you lead?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I would fail utterly at is being a spy. I think
That's what a spy would say.
I think I'm far too talkative and engage with people and have conversations. But also, I wouldn't be on a podcast broadcasting who I am as a spy. That's just a poor way of doing a spy. I don't really know what spies do because I've never been in that part of the world or that part of a profession. However, there is an important. Let me just set into context what the British Council is, and then we can engage at different levels. So I talked about our setup. We were set up after the First World War. And it was during the time of rising of fascism, fractious world. I mean, you could say the same now. Lots of other issues. And there was a question of how can we they are globally, universally agreed values. Human rights is one of them that almost everyone in the world thinks human rights, the Charter of Human Rights is a globally agreed approach. So how can we actually combat those extremism, divisive ideas, and agree a more prosperous world? And that's why, if you remember nothing from this conversation in terms of British Council, you should remember one thing: the British Council were set up to do two things to achieve one thing. So the two things that we do is building understanding or facilitating understanding between nations, between the UK and the rest of the world, and between the rest of the world themselves.
Mhm.
We think that will lead to trust. So if I understand you and I understand where you're coming from, with time, I will trust you. If I trust you, then I can engage with you. I can have an exchange. I can do commerce with you, so those are the two things. And it leads to the third thing, which is a prosperous world.
Mm.
We exist to make the world a more prosperous place to live. We believe that if the world is safer, is more prosperous, is more connected, there is trust, the UK will be in a better place.
Mm.
Because, if you can't be the only house who's living in this wonderful safety in a sea of fire and issues and problems, that is not the case. You have to get your environment better. So that's why the British Council exists. And then we do this through two vehicles: education and arts and culture. And we are the cultural organization of the UK. So we are UK's representative when it comes to culture, engagement, and facilitating those cultural exchanges, which are wonderful. Now, it's a different place to be here in Rwanda because, of course, we don't have a history of colonization in Rwanda.
Mhm.
But in other places, I think it's important to acknowledge that history and understand it. It is our responsibility as the British Council to engage with people because up until maybe 100 years ago, the word British was synonymous
With colonizer
with colonization, with really difficult histories around
and
this part of the
abuse
world. Absolutely.
and genocide.
All of them. This is not for us to run away from. This is to say, this is what the UK was known for at one point in their history. The British Council is different. And it doesn't mean that, of course, anyone with a history of 90 years, there would be moments of mistakes, issues, problems, all of those other things. But the question becomes, how can we now engage together and engage on an equal footing? Not as this idea of the global north telling the global south what to do. Not this idea, I'll give you a really tangible example. On Saturday, and you can find this on our website, there is a seminar online talking about the use of ChatGPT and AI in English language teaching, put together by the British Council. Who is the main speaker? Is a teacher from Senegal. So we are facilitating a very good teacher from Senegal to talk to teachers in Africa and around the world about the use of AI in the classroom in those places. He would be far better placed to understand what a teacher faces in a rural area, up in a mountain, surrounded by hills. For some of them, ChatGPT isn't even an option. The option is how can I get the lights on? It's a whole different area. But he will understand where different people are than getting someone from the UK to do it. So it is this equal footing. We're looking for good practice anywhere, and then we facilitate that. We learn as the UK and we share our learning. It's a mutual sharing and exchange, not a superiority matter. And when these accusations comes, and it has come to me in different places, whether it's neo-imperialism, you are imposing your own ideals on people. And it's no, let's have a conversation. I'm open to it. I agree to how things were previously were wrong. I disagree with that. But the UK is, at this time, the UK recognizes its history and place in the world, but also now we are different. And that does not mean we should hide from it. It does not mean that we cannot engage with it meaningfully. And we should have these conversations, and we should have them openly.
It sounds all well and good, you know, But one of the things that, I try to follow British news a little bit.
Mm.
Um, it seems as if Britain is kind of pulling itself back from the world. Whether it's Brexit,
Mm.
whether it's some of the electoral choices they make, it's whether it's how they deal with immigration and all that. Do you not worry for the British Council? Because this is what happens when there's any kind of shock. First, they'll come for the immigrants. Then they'll turn around and ask, "Hey, why are they spending our taxes on some nonsense teaching random Rwandans about AI? We need to spend more money in our schools. It's our public transport that's breaking down. It's our public universities that need more funding. Why are we spending money on everyone except us?" And that is it seems somewhat fair. It seems like a somewhat fair question to ask. It's British taxpayer money, his Majesty's government, and that's one part of the question. Like,
Mm.
why are you spending as people have less and less money, as public services are being cut left, right, left, and center? Why spend this money on external sources? Now, for me as an African watching these conversations, I'm then also asking, you're right. Why are they spending this money on us instead of, there must be something fishy going on here? Do you get
I
where we're
do.
coming
I do.
from?
No, I get it
Like
fully.
both sides, right? So the British public is saying you're spending our money. Now, us Africans watching the British public ask these questions, we're like, you know,
We get it.
why are they spending money
Yeah.
on us? Because then we start thinking there must be something hidden behind this. If the British government is willing to spend that kind of money, there must be a net gain here. And then the question that becomes is, what is that? What is the British government? Why is the British government willing to spend this kind of money on us, despite the fact that there are still challenges back home?
So one thing I will challenge is the categorization of the British public,
Mm,
because we're a country of nearly 70 million, and it's what you see on the news. It depends on what news you watch,
mm,
and who you watch. Is the broadcast of a certain section of any society. Is like this is there is a group of people who think this way, and that's not a I can't tell you that no one in the UK thinks why we shouldn't spend money anywhere outside or any of those ideals. I mean, the British Council, I should say, is not a political organization. We do not deal in politics. I cannot comment on it, but I can talk about the wider societal engagement. Now, so first of all, I don't think that everyone, as the British public, has the same view.
mm,
In whatever topic it is, we don't have the same view. Um, the question becomes, let me address that last comment: is why and what is the value is for the UK? The value for the UK is genuinely to do with few things. One is the fact that, as I was saying, if the world is more prosperous place, so let's say everyone in Rwanda speaks English excellently,
mm,
and English is no longer an issue, and also Rwanda. By the way, people think sometimes we push English as it should be the only language for any country. We actually oppose that. We think there is a lot more value with other languages, but English for any society or government or education system that want to teach it will help you to teach it properly and how to do it, because of course we have a lot of experience in it, but not we don't go around selling English as a product and saying
mm.
you should forget about your local languages. This is what you should have. That isn't the case. I speak Somali, I speak Arabic. I wouldn't give them up for anything. I would like my children to have to be multilingual. So that's one thing. Now, let's take that. So everyone in Rwanda speaks English tremendously well. The wealth of country grows, and Rwanda now is looking for partners around the world to engage and to do commerce with.
Mm.
Now, if the UK has been on that journey, connecting with you, engaging with you, then you are more likely to send your children to study universities in the UK.
Mm.
You are more likely to do business in the UK or with the UK. You are more likely to have a trust and understanding of how the UK does things.
Mm.
That's a direct benefit. That's an
To the
absolute
UK.
to the UK, of course. It's a mutual benefit. So at one point, 70% of decision makers around the world. So this is will be from the level of director general of a department to ministers to world leaders studied in the UK, and quite a lot of them engaged through the British Council. The amount of people there hasn't been a senior official. There's always been a senior official that I've met in those countries who said to me, always, without a shadow of a doubt, I received a scholarship from the British Council. And the
Mm.
British Council actually put me on this success.
Mm.
I went to the UK to study, and I still remember it fondly. And now, today, my child is taking IELTS to go to the UK. And that instantly opens the door. It opens the door for us a lot more than other nations. And then you have a conversation and you say, the education system you saw in the UK, it could be improved. It's not perfect. No one is perfect. But how can we work together to learn from that? So we are not saying this is simply because I think if we just say, oh, we're doing it because
From
of
the goodness of our hearts.
people, it's difficult to believe.
Mm.
It's and some of that there are many charities and many other globally that do things from the goodness of their heart. We all do it. All of us do certain things absolutely from the goodness of our heart. But at a state level, from a UK nation government, we understand this absolutely crucially is that if we all have the same, we subscribe to the same global ideals and values, and we help each other to engage and to work together, then we will make each other richer. We will all have a better life together,
Mm.
rather than sort of creating barriers and having difficulties, because essentially the UK, it's a relatively small country in the northern part of the world. We need to engage with the rest of the world. We cannot be insular. We cannot be
I mean that's been the, and this is a joke, but like historically that's been the problem. You've refused to remain insular. You know?
we want to make connections that better than before.
Ah,
Those connections are different in quality, and also the aim of them are different.
I'd hope so.
So we want to engage with the rest of
The
the
last
world.
time the UK was a power,
But
it was
also,
not fun for anyone.
I'll tell you in a very small way, the
Mm.
last time the UK was in power or we're sending people around the world, those people didn't look like me.
Mm.
So this is, the diversity of UK is fantastic. It's for me to sit here as a Black African and British, and to represent the UK and the British Council in terms of culture. It's a unique proposition. I meet heads of missions, ambassadors, high commissioners who are from different cultures and different ethnicities. Historically, there was a moment in UK history where the first minister, which is sort of the most senior person in a provincial government of Scotland, was Hamza Yusuf, British, from a Pakistani heritage. We had Rishi Sunak, our prime minister, British, from an Indian background. We had Vaughan Guttin in Wales, Black British and Black Welsh. Um, and you think, wow, that is, if it's just for mere representation, we are a nation of multiculturalism. That doesn't mean I'm not painting the UK to be the perfect utopia. Far
No,
from
don't
it.
worry, we know.
Of course, I'm talking to an informed audience. But what I'm saying is the UK of yesteryears is very different from the UK today. And the UK today understands what it needs to do to be a good global citizen. Because people like myself and many, many other of my countrymen, if we get into those sort of more colonial mindsets, more of those conversations, we would be the first people to say that's not the right way. The amount of time we talk about decolonization in the British Council, and we've got papers, research on decolonization. How can we engage with this meaningfully? Because a lot of it was our fault. So how can we engage with it meaningfully? How can we actually help those? If you were, I was talking to, part of what we do is help countries to develop their curriculum, and we were looking at how can we develop meaningful curriculum to combat climate change. And you'll find, certain nations will go and get curriculum from another country and just study it. And I was talking to an African minister for education, and he was saying, in that country in particular, at one point, children were being taught about what happens when it snows, and it never snows in that country. It's in the southern part of the world. And children are sitting there talking about this magical powder that comes from the sky and thinking, we have no clue what you're talking about. We much better talk about the scarcity of water, desertification. We talk about planting trees, things in our environment, things that we live with day to day. Now, who did he look at to help with developing that type of curriculum? The British Council. Because we understand how we can engage and how can we think through these things. When we talk about English, I have a strong view of English in particular, because I think English is no longer a product that we own. English is not a language that there are far more people who speak English around the world than in the UK. It isn't our language. English is a global product. Everyone owns English. Now, they are different in terms of how you teach English, and you teach English with a way where it has resonance with culture and heritage, and you're talking about Charles Dickens, you talk about Shakespeare, and that might be more prevalent in the UK. We taught the poetry, the spoken word, all of that taught English in the UK. It's very different of how we're encouraging people to teach English around the world. There is English as a functional language. It's just as a tool, as you use your laptop, as you use different things. Everyone knows a Hoover as a Hoover, but a Hoover actually is the brand name, is a vacuum cleaner. So English is just a language that you use to engage with the people around the world and to do commerce. If you happen to use it at home, yeah, fair enough. It's much better to use actually your mother tongue and your own language at home, and use English with your locality. So talk about English in terms of farming, how to deal with water, how to deal with hills, rather than, everyone should teach this brand of English. And then you'll find the variations of English, of accents around the world. So these are the things that we are trying to implement and we're trying to promote, is not be tethered to the UK. No, is to look at the UK as an equal partner, that we engage with each other, and we engage with each other with humbleness.
Last question. Unfortunately, you, your wife, your first daughter, and Kanyana are about to leave. So what's next for the Abdi and his family? Where are you going?
It is unfortunate and it is bittersweet. I really wanted to be here longer, and I think I will definitely come back to Rwanda. I was introduced to Rwanda because the British Council gave me a job here and paid for my airfare. But I will come back to Rwanda using my own money. That's sort of, once you put your money where your mouth is, and I will definitely want to come back and spend time here and look at actually if one point in the future having a footing in Rwanda. We are going, our next, so it's this idea of going around the world and working in different places. My next job as of latter half of next week is going to be, which is the end of November, is going to be Director Romania and Bulgaria, based in Bucharest. Thank you very much.
That's a big move, eh?
It is a big move. It is a very different move.
You're getting closer and closer to the home countries.
It's only around an hour or 2 hours away from London. No, it's it's a peculiar way how we work and what jobs come up at what point and
Mm,
all of those things. But I am looking forward to it. I am looking forward to learning from another culture,
mm,
understanding what happens in that part of Europe. It's a moment where the UK is resetting the relationship with the European Union.
mm,
It's a moment that we have the aggression against Ukraine and the war, and of course these countries are on the forefront of it. And it's a moment of when the British Council is absolutely needed, of exchanging those cultural values, of building trust and understanding between
mm.
the people. That's much more needed than any other time before. And I always, as I keep saying, you can go on our website and you can, and we'll come to one or two things I want to tell people about in terms of products that are specific to Rwanda. But always remember that the British Council really works tremendously hard on creating understanding, trust between the people of the world to have a more prosperous world everywhere.
Abdi, I give you 2 minutes to give us your sales pitch for British Council Rwanda.
Absolutely. What I will say is come and engage with us. So that's the
Mm.
first one.
Where do you work?
So we work in Kachiro,
Mm.
not far from His Excellency the President's office, just behind it on the
Mhm.
street behind it. You can find anything that you need from the British Council. You can find it online. So whether
Mhm.
you are a young artist who looking at what can I do to improve myself, what can I do to understand, to learn more, you can go to our website and look for the So Creative Learning Platform.
Mhm.
That's a learning platform that, as an artist, will teach you how to create a business. What are the policies? How can you do marketing? How can you do contracting? So how can you make a business to be able to make a living from your art? Other things are there. So whether we support residencies. So how, as an artist, you can go to other African countries or to the UK
Mm.
to have a deep residency, to have a better skill in your art and in your craft, and to work with other people. So there are many things that we do in terms of the
Mm.
arts and culture. For education, just since I've been here, we've supported the education and the English language development as part of a program called Stella, Secondary English Language Improvement Rwanda, in partnership with MasterCard Foundation, Ministry of Education, and Rwanda Basic Board of Education. 9,000 English language teachers, STEM teachers, have
Mhm.
been supported to improve at least one level of English.
Mm.
So, and this will have a massive ramification on the learning outcomes because, of course, the language of instruction is English for all the learners. We looked at, we are working with the University of Rwanda College of Education, and so far we supported 3,500 pre-service, what's called, those are student teachers to come
Mhm.
on the system. With the So Creative, in terms of artists, so far we supported 500 young Rwandans to access that platform. And we've also supported festivals and others. So I'm giving people a different ways of engaging, from a teacher to an artist to someone who wants to study abroad or has a take a professional qualification,
Mm.
to someone who their children go to school and they want to do international qualifications. All of those is British Council, and it's all about creating opportunities. Now, last thing I'll mention and how you can engage with us is that we were talking about creating understanding
Mm.
between people of the world. One of the best ways to create understanding is to read and engage with the product of a nation. Now, we have the British Council Digital Library. The British Council Digital Library has around 100,000 resources. It goes from plays, music, audiobooks, magazines, scientific journals. So anyone who's over the age of 18 with a smartphone can access it
For free?
for free. Absolutely for free. So it's a premium product, but we're doing a freemium offer here. So at the moment, it's free. And as people engage with it, and I hope we'll continue with that offer, but it's one of the best offers that the British Council can come with. We have Rwandan authors and Rwandan books in there. We have other African authors and African books. We have people from around the world, and of course from the UK. So you can download, if you are getting on the bus this weekend to go to Mosanze, to go to Mohazi, to go to somewhere in your family, and you go in up country, and you have a you know right either a bus journey or a car for a couple of hours. Go to the British Council Digital Library, download a book, a play, music, audiobook, and listen to it and just enjoy it. If you are a teacher, a student, go and see what is the latest thing that is happening in your profession and engage with it for free. Things that in other platforms would be for money. So this is one of our cultural products that we offer to everyone. And it is in hundreds of countries around the world. In some countries, it's for money. In some countries, for free. So that's there was one of the things I think about very fondly about the British Council is that our products and services go from cradle to grave. You can engage with the British Council at any age and at any time with a whole variety of products, informative and fun and engaging.
Abdi, thank you so much for joining me on the long form. I've learned so much. Maybe the next country director, if I meet him or her, I'll not immediately think, spy. I'll be more likely to, kind of sit down with that individual and maybe discuss different things. Thank you so much for joining me. It was an absolutely great time. Your story was, especially the Iraqi one. I mean, sometimes you watch things on the news, but you never actually get a chance to talk to someone who's been there and has gone through that. Yeah, it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed you. I hope your experience here has not chased away anyone. I hope we've made you feel comfortable.
You did. I leave as an ardent advocate and lover and supporter for Rwanda. Thank you very much for having me here. I've absolutely enjoyed talking to you. And when you next time meet anyone, both you, listeners and viewers, when you meet someone from the British Council, feel free to have a conversation and ask them the hard questions as well. Because I'm not going to be here. They can
No,
deal
you
with
won't.
it.
You won't. Thank you so much, Abdi.
Thank you. Have a very good day.
Cheers. If you enjoyed the conversation today, share your thoughts with us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.